Before the summer vacation ended, the two friends, Xiaonan and Lanlan, returned to school early. Around that time, a post about a haunted dorm went viral on the campus forum. That day, the two girls experienced the most terrifying and frightening night of their lives. Ever since Xiaonan saw the post about the haunted dorm on the campus forum, she became haunted. The post mentioned a tragedy that had happened several years before. The girl who was being bullied by her roommates finally escaped through her dorm window. After that, many of her former roommates dropped out. Rumor had it that they had all seen the girl who had committed suicide in their dorm, suffering a nervous breakdown and being forced to leave campus. The more Xiaonan read, the more she felt that the dorm described in the post bore a striking resemblance to her own. The layout, the floor level, even the view from the window, everything was identical. A growing sense of dread gripped her, especially since she and Lanlan, sleeping in the top bunk, were the only ones in the dormitory who had returned early, even though the summer vacation hadn't ended yet and no one had arrived. The dormitory had become eerily deserted, and an indescribable darkness had descended. Late that night, under the dim moonlight, Xiaonan tossed and turned in her lower bunk, unable to sleep. Half asleep, she heard a soft gasp from the bunk above her. The sound was low, but it carried a chilling quality. Xiaonan suddenly returned to the story of the girl who had committed suicide, and her heart immediately clenched, a shiver running down her spine. Lanlan? She asked quietly and hesitantly, but received no response. The sobbing continued, as if coming from a deeper darkness, revealing endless sadness and resentment. Xiaonan wanted to check if Lanlan was crying, but she didn't dare look. She couldn't help but stretch out her hand in the dark to feel the top bunk. Her fingers touched the warm bed, and her heart calmed down. But when she stretched out her hand again, there was no one there. Lanlan wasn't in the bed. Xiaonan's mind went blank, and her heart almost burst out of her chest. At that moment, she saw a long, messy lock of hair slowly slipping from the top bunk, dangling inexorably over the edge. Terror swept through her like a tide, almost suffocating her. She instinctively covered her head with the quilt, her body trembling uncontrollably, her hands and feet cold and unable to move. She fiercely suppressed her breathing, afraid to make any sound. But after a moment, overcome by curiosity and fear, she gently parted the quilt a little and glanced over. Through the tangle of dangling hair, she saw two eyes staring at her. Those eyes, filled with resentment and endless coldness, were staring at her unwaveringly. Unable to bear it anymore, Xiaonan screamed, threw off the quilt, and jumped out of bed. The moment she sunk, a white shadow from the dazzling gaze swooped down on her, almost hitting her clothes. Unable to bear the gaze anymore, she ran to the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. Her chest heaved violently as she felt the quilt pressing against the cold panel. After a moment of silence, Xiaonan heard a soft suction sound outside the bathroom door, as if something had stopped at the entrance. Xiaonan held her breath, her body as stiff as stone, not daring to make a sound. Then she heard the dormitory door close, and there was complete silence. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaonan plucked up her courage, opened the bathroom door slightly and stuck her head out. The dormitory was still eerily dim and quiet, the air thick with a stifling chill. She cautiously walked out and was certain that Lan Lan was indeed gone. Her mind was in a state of confusion, and she decided to go to her roommate's dorm downstairs to look for Zhu Ming, who had also returned early. As Xiaonan trembled as she reached the dorm door, it suddenly opened silently. The pale moonlight cast a shadow over the door, and Xiaonan immediately stared at the grim scene. Standing in the corridor outside was a girl with a bloody face and a blank look in her eyes, as if she had just emerged from hell. Xiaonan felt as if her consciousness had suddenly been swept into an abyss. Her vision went black, and she collapsed. Summer vacation wasn't over yet, but Lan Lan had returned to her dorm early, intending to use the last 2 weeks to review her lessons. She hadn't expected Xiaonan to return early too. She slept in the bed below her, a quiet girl who rarely spoke to anyone. When everyone was talking animatedly in the dorm, Xiaonan would curl up in her bed, as if lost in her own world.
She was indifferent to everything outside, so although they had lived in the same dormitory together for 2 years, Xiaonan was unfamiliar to anyone. Now, being alone with her made her feel a little uneasy. That night, Lan Lan lay on her top bunk as usual, headphones on, watching a TV show, the light of her phone shining on her face. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of a pale hand, slowly reaching out from below. Its movements were slow and stiff, hovering over the edge of the bed, as if it were groping for something. Lan Lan's heart pounded, and her body went rigid. She pressed herself against the inner edge of the bed with all her strength, trying to avoid the hand as much as possible. Fear swept over her. A thought flashed through her mind. Was it Xiaonan? What was she doing so strangely at this hour? After a moment, the hand slowly retracted. Lan Lan slowly caught her breath, her heart still pounding. She had to know what Xiaonan was doing, so she quietly took off her headphones and slowly leaned over the edge of the bed to see what was happening on the slope. In the dim light, Lan Lan saw Xiaonan, her head buried in the quilt, huddled in the corner of the slope. She was just wondering why Xiaonan was covering his head on such a hot day when the quilt opened slightly, revealing a single eye fixed on her through the gap. Lan Lan's hair stood on end and her heart squeezed tightly. Her fingers clung to the edge of the bed, her nails digging into the wood. At that moment, Xiaonan suddenly screamed and jumped out from under the quilt, hurtling to the floor like an uncontrollable, frightened animal. Lan Lan trembled with fear. Her hands went limp, she lost her balance and fell onto her stomach. She lay on the floor for a long moment to recover, then struggled to her feet. She rubbed her forehead and felt her fingers touch something slippery and sticky. Lan Lan knew that her head was broken and bleeding, and she didn't dare to stay any longer. She walked to the bathroom, looking for a towel to wipe the blood. However, the bathroom door was tightly closed. Xiaonan must be inside. Lan Lan felt that her behavior tonight was very strange, and a strange fear swept through her heart. Not wanting to provoke Xiaonan further, she decided to go look for Su Ming in the dormitory downstairs and bandage the wound. Lan Lan washed out of the dormitory, not even daring to look back, and quickly reached Su Ming's door, but it was locked. Her heart sunk, realizing that Su Ming wasn't home tonight. With no other choice, she bravely returned to her dormitory. As she hesitantly pushed the door open again, the sight in front of her almost made her scream. Xiaonan was standing in the doorway, his face pale, his lips almost ashen and his eyes blank and cloudy, as if he had seen something extremely terrifying. At that moment, Lan Lan's blood seemed to freeze. Then she saw Xiao Nan's body sway slightly before falling to the ground. Moonlight gradually flooded the campus, the dorm lights dimmed, and the air was filled with the smell of fried food. It had been 2 days since Xiao Nan had fainted in front of Lan Lan. They had finally resolved the terrifying and hilarious misunderstanding that night and had become good friends. They were now happily celebrating their reconciliation over a hearty dinner. They chatted and laughed, teasing each other about their ridiculous behavior that night. Don't read the gossip posts on the school forum anymore. They scare you, Lan Lan said with a smile as she picked up a piece of fried chicken. I don't want to, Xiao Nan shrugged helplessly. That night, your face was covered in blood. You really looked like a ghost. I didn't cry. Cry? I didn't cry. Lan Lan froze, looking at Xiao Nan in bewilderment. I was watching a comedy variety show the other day. I didn't cry at all. Xiao Nan's smiling face gradually hardened, and Lan Lan couldn't help but become serious. The atmosphere in the dormitory suddenly became strange. The laughter seemed to disappear in an instant, leaving only a heavy silence. Remembering that night, the sound of sobs seemed close to Xiao Nan's ears. Her smile was a bit forced. Oh, I clearly heard someone crying. Don't scare me. At that moment, a faint gasp of air suddenly reached them, as if it came from far away, but it seemed close. Xiao Nan and Lan Lan felt a shiver run through their bodies, and their breathing quickened. Stiffly, they turned their heads and saw a third person looming at the other end of the tense table where they were sitting opposite each other. They sat listlessly beside the horse, their heads lowered, their long, disheveled hair hiding their faces, their shoulders slightly tensed with the foul odor